I've been watching a lot of personal development videos and I've been engaged in lots of personal development programs. And I've been thinking about the nature of the authentic self. What does that mean? The authentic self, the real self, the wise self, however you want to describe it. But I think about what are the qualities of the authentic self or the real self? What do they represent in terms of key qualities? And what I've realized is that the key component to the authentic self, it's about the courage to express ourselves, to be able to express our feelings, our thoughts, even though others might find it offensive. The challenge, of course, is how do I express something which is controversial or something that somebody might not like to hear? So the idea is, how do I communicate that, hoping or knowing that it lands just where it needs to land without the other person reacting to that? That's an art. And that's not something that I can necessarily teach. I can certainly suggest a pathway or some key pointers. I can certainly suggest that. What I can't do is give you a script. The script itself is something that you have to discover, because that's going to be determined and based on your narrative, how you use language, the context you find yourself in, and the person that you're trying to communicate something to. Now, I do a lot of Facebook responses. I see stuff on Facebook that am impressed by. I see stuff on Facebook that is really well thought out, considered. And then I also see in my judgment, and notice the language I'm using, in my judgment, as not well thought out and is not well presented. And actually, there are times I find it quite offensive. One of the things that irritates me is where people assume that by putting something up on Facebook, everybody is going to agree. In the same way as in our interactions with other humans on a day-to-day level, there's this assumption that when we make a comment or we express a thought or a feeling, that they're going to respond according to our expectations. And of course, if they don't, how do we deal with that? Now, looking at it from the perspective of the authentic self, what we have here is, before responding, is to deliberate, to think about where it might land in the person. So early on, I was saying it involves courage, because the courage is a vital, important aspect. I say something, it lands in somebody, they react to it. I then find myself reacting to it because I have a big should in my head, which suggests that they should be responsive, not act their anger out or whatever they might act out. And therein lies the problem. So from a young age, we learned that communicating authentically or honestly is not going to get the result that we intended it to get. In the work that I do, which is specifically anger management, what I'm doing is I'm trying to teach others to express themselves in a way that what they feel, what they need, and what they think gets the most effective and responsive response. And there is a difference between a response and a reaction. A response is where somebody will acknowledge what you said without overreacting. And then, of course, a reaction is when somebody finds what you've said offensive, and then they react. when we say things that are unkind or cruel or nasty or insensitive, is not to react to the response or the reaction we get back, but to hear it for what it is and not make up stories in our head about what we think we heard, but to investigate that. I describe that as doing a reality check. Coming back to authenticity. Being authentic is being able to encourage imperfection. The courage to recognize I'm limited, the courage to make mistakes, drop the ball, even get things wrong. And I'm, by the way, not comfortable with the word right or wrong, good or bad, should or shouldn't. So it's important that you know that, because that kind of language can also be defined as antagonistic. So I don't say to somebody, you shouldn't say that, or you shouldn't do that. What's wrong with you? That's really bad. I do what I can to eliminate using language like that. I do what I can to eliminate using language which is designed to be antagonistic. By doing that, it helps me to be authentic. It helps me to be real. And as I said earlier on, that's an art. So on the basis of that being an art, we have to really hear our own narrative. We have to hear ourselves long before the other person hears us. And I'm not suggesting that's easy. Coming back to authenticity, coming back to what it means to be real. So it takes courage. We take risks. It might be that a person reacts. It might be that a person stops liking us or stops loving us. It might be that the person feels incredibly hurt and then act out whatever they feel from that place. Our challenge, or my challenge, is not to take offense, but to hear their response to their reaction without taking offense. Now, I'm not talking about getting sadistic pleasure from confronting, challenging, expressing my view, my opinion. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that in terms of perception, that each of us have a different reality and have a different perception. And I'd like to give you an example of that, specifically when it comes to perception. Firstly, there's an assumption that we all perceive reality in the same way. And of course, for those of you who are listening to this and who've done a fair amount of work on themselves, will realize, that perception is relative. Perception is subjective. Truth is relative. Truth is subjective. There's no individual single truth, unique truth that we all need to embrace. Each of us hold an aspect of whatever the truth might be. The challenge that we have here is to find a way of being able to take risks, to present our point in such a way that the other person will simply hear it without thinking it's designed to criticize, be antagonistic, be judgmental, to shame or blame. And as I said earlier on, that's the art of clear communication. What I'm suggesting, as the authentic self inside of me comes alive, I'm able to communicate my thoughts and feelings without feeling the great need to suck it in, stuff it, hold on to the resentment, hold on to the regrets. I'm classically what you called an NP, a nice person. For me, all of my validation came from what other people thought of me. So who I was in the world, what I was in the world, what I thought in the world was based on your view of me. And I was desperate for being reassured by you, loved by you, appreciated by you, validated by you. So what I did is I made sure that everything that came out of my mouth was not confrontational, not challenging, not thought-provoking. Everything that came out of my mouth was designed to get you to like me, even more than you already did. That's not authentic. So I'd have a thought or I'd experience a feeling and I'd want to say something, but I was too afraid to because of my great fear of being rejected and abandoned. So I want to leave you with that. If you have feedback or you have any comments or you want to respond accordingly, I mean, by all means, please do that.